If you clicked on this video thinking that I'm a Disney hater, I am anything but. I will always love their classics and masterpieces, and the Walt Disney Company has such a long and interesting history that it's hard not to be interested in it. Their history is something that the company should go back to themselves. However, the Walt Disney Company is creating their own apocalypse, and they have nobody to blame but themselves. You may not believe it now, you may not believe it even a month or two from now, but over time you will understand why their collapse, of which they created themselves, will in the long run be a good thing. To understand why the Walt Disney Company is in such bad shape, it is important to understand the history of the three companies: Disney, Pixar, and LucasFilm. First, Disney. To make a long story short, Walt Disney, along with his brother Roy, grew up in Chicago during the turn of the century. Born in 1901, Walt took an interest in drawing from a young age. Although he did not do well in school, he did have an active imagination. It all started when he was asked by a neighborhood doctor to draw a horse. He not only got paid for it, but it would become his lifelong passion. Moving to Kansas City, Missouri in 1911, where he was introduced to vaudeville and film by a student at his school named Walter Peffner. Over time, his fascination with film took over, and several years later, in 1917, he was a cartoonist for his high school paper. 1919 saw him meeting friend and future co-worker of iWorks. By 1921, his independent studio had their first success with the Wafflegrams, which were current takes on classic fairy tales. Little did he know that this would be the stepping stone for what he would do later on. Though not financially successful, it encouraged him to do more, and this led him to make the Alice shorts. While the first short was well received, ultimately the company went defunct. Walt moved to Hollywood, where, with the help of a New York film distributor, helped create the Walt Disney Company, where they produced lots more Alice shorts. This led to the creation of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and of course, Mickey Mouse and the Silly Symphonies. But Disney Brothers' passion for the medium quickly paid off. To show how Mickey's creation and Walt's passion for animation was described by one employee as up-designed Mickey's physical appearance, but Walt gave him his soul. He debuted in the 1928 short Plain Crazy. Ben, the first sound cartoon, Steamboat Willie, the same year. Steamboat Willie is regarded as a revolution in animation. Mickey Mouse and the Silly Symphony shorts dominated the studio from 1928 to 1938, leading to the creation of Mickey's Friends, Donald Duck, Goofy, Minnie Mouse, and more. By 1934, Walt had the idea of expanding an animated story into a 90-minute feature-length film. He remembered reading Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as a child, and he thought that it would be a good story. However, this revolutionary idea did not suit well with his wife Lillian or his brother Roy. Even his staff were against it. He had to take out a loan, mortgage his house, and even needed an additional $250,000 to finish the film. The film was a sensation, and this led to the many masterpieces to come: Pinocchio, Bambi, Dumbo, Cinderella, Fantasia, Sleeping Beauty, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, The Jungle Book, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, and The Three Caballeros. Around the late 1940s, while he was working on Cinderella, and while his studio was recovering from World War II, he tried expanding into live action. A few of his films combined animation and live action, but it was only through Treasure Island in 1950 that showed Walt can produce live-action films. This led to more greats like Mary Poppins, The Shaggy Dog, The Parent Trap, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Old Yeller, The Absent-Minded Professor, and expanding to TV with a Mickey Mouse Club, his broadcasts on the opening of his dream project Disneyland, and more. But with the projects continued, like his other passion project Walt Disney World, which he called Before the Project, and many other film and shorts like Winnie the Pooh and other Mickey and Friends shorts continued until his death from lung cancer in 1966. Unfortunately, after Walt's death, Disney wasn't the same for many years. They did turn out good stuff here and there, like the 1973 masterpiece Robin Hood, the caper comedy Never a Dull Moment, and the original Freaky Friday. But the company did nothing but experimentation. In the 1970s, they turned out lots of lighthearted comedies, but everybody noticed that they were getting tired and stale. In the 1980s, they did more darker and mature material, like Tron, Return to Oz, and Something Wicked This Way Comes, and their animated hits like The Fox and the Hound and Oliver and Company didn't grab everybody, at least at the time. Most of these films struggled to find an audience. And then, all of a sudden, like Frankenstein rising up for the first time in ages, like Gandalf rising from the dead in The Two Towers, and like a phoenix rising from the ashes, The Little Mermaid was released in 1989 to iconic status, giving rise to what was known as the Disney Renaissance. These films are also iconic, memorable, and timeless. All of them were masterpieces. Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Pocahontas, Mulan, and Tarzan. Now, why did these films do so well? One reason is that they had the right people involved. Ron Clements, John Musker, Rob Minkoff, Alan Menken, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and Michael Eisner are just some of the people we have to thank for turning the company around. I think one other reason why these movies worked is because the writers knew how to take these stories and make them compelling films. Not only that, but they took their time. They planned everything out, from the characters, to the motivations, to the animation, to the songs, all of it. You can actually tell that they cared enough about the film to make it a good movie. And it showed. These, like the original Disney masterpieces of the 30s to the 60s, had memorable characters, great villains, wonderful animation, unforgettable songs, and airtight stories. Not to mention, these princesses would be immortalized in Disney lore. These movies would make Walt proud. As for the live action stuff, most of it was just garbage. Yes, to be fair though, you had some diamonds in the rough, like the Santa Claus, the Mighty Ducks, White Fang, and the hilarity that is Hocus Pocus, but most of them were either mediocre or terrible, with little to no value in them at all. Now let's talk about Lucasfilm. In 1971, George Lucas, fresh from the same college he went to with Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, and Martin Scorsese, made a film with Coppola called THX 1138, an underappreciated sci-fi classic about a dystopian society where emotions and feelings are controlled. The film was taken over by Warner Brothers, who edited the film without Lucas's consent, removing the sexual repression themes present in the original cut. As a result of this, Lucas created his own company called LucasFilm Limited, and his first film was the coming-of-age classic American Graffiti. And after that, well, you know the rest. Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Labyrinth, and Willow, to name a few. They would also do other projects like Red Tails and Captain EO with Michael Jackson. Today, Lucasfilm is primarily known only for Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and both franchises have loyal fan bases like yours truly that continue to this day. Now let's talk about Pixar for a minute. Pixar started as an independent company in the late 1970s. In the 1980s, they partnered with Lucasfilm on several of their projects. They even worked on other films, like the Genesis demonstration in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. They believed that digital technology was the way of the future. In the 1980s, they created several shorts to test out this theory. These included The Adventures of Wally B and Andre, Ruxo Jr., featuring their future company logo, and Knick Knack. It wouldn't be until 1995 when they revolutionized animation with Toy Story. Ever since then, animation was never the same, for better or worse. The team at Pixar, John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, Brad Bird, Joe Raft, and Pete Docter, when these films were being made, they were made with story in mind. They had a structure that went like this. 1. Admire the character trying instead of actually succeeding. 2. Think of what's interesting to the audience instead of how to entertain them, aka trust your audience. 3. Think of a theme, but don't know what the story is until you're done writing it. 4. Be simple, no detours. 5. What's the essence of a story? 6. You and the audience must identify with a character. 7. Know the difference between coincidences to get a character in trouble and to get them out of it just to cheat. And 8. Story is testing, not refining. Their films, as a result of this strange strategy, have caused them to be beloved films with heart and meaning. Toy Story, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, Up, Inside Out, Monsters Inc., WALL-E, Coco, and one of my favorites, Finding Nemo. Now, why did I give you that incredibly long history lesson? Well, that's because I wanted you to understand what these studios originally stood for. They were all created with good intentions. They were all created with one thing in mind: quality. They wanted to create good films and shows and happy memories. So, let me ask this question. What the hell happened? In the case of LucasFilm, Disney bought LucasFilm in 2012. Kathleen Kennedy was appointed president, and I think you know the rest. The sequel trilogy that got mixed reactions from people, the overabundance of Star Wars projects, feminism agendas, wokeness, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny are all the main reasons why the company nowadays has been shunned by Star Wars fans and the general public alike. What was a company that revolutionized visual effects and storytelling now became a bad joke. It's gotten so bad that so many people want Kathleen Kennedy fired. The issue that Kennedy has repeatedly failed to realize is that while there's nothing wrong with strong female leads, the issue is that they are not interesting characters. We look at female empowerment characters like Scarlett O'Hara, Ellen Ripley, Mulan, and others because of the struggles they had to go through in order to become who they are by the end of the film. It's even more meaningful when they are true stories. Real women who go through real ordeals, we connect with them. In Kathleen Kennedy's eyes, making them strong and empowered is better than making them interesting characters. The bigger issue stems from the fact that these projects were rushed. Rather than taking their time to develop the story, the direction, the logical consistencies, and the pacing, these films and shows were written in a time span of 3 weeks to 4 months. I don't think that was time well spent. In the case of Star Wars especially, with the exception of Rogue One, fans have pointed out all of the numerous writing errors, character assassinations, mediocre new characters, illogical decisions, lack of understanding as to why people love Star Wars in the first place, and rules that George Lucas and Clone Wars writer Dave Filoni created were broken, straying far away from what was firmly established. But that's another story. As for Pixar, John Lasseter, the glue that held Pixar together, was fired, citing allegations of misconduct in 2018. The last projects under his leadership were Coco and Ralph Breaks the Internet. After that, the project started to suffer. Turning Red, Luca, Onward, and the most recent film Elemental were all financial flops, and other films like Toy Story 4, Incredibles 2, and Lightyear got very split reactions from people. These films were not just basic, they just existed. None of these films were very compelling films. Some people might like them, which is fine, but most can agree by comparison to what Pixar did before, these films were terribly written. Financially, these films underperformed. Elemental at this time barely was able to make $315 million out of $200 million budget. For Pixar, these latest string of flops can't save the company. The public's expectations are high-quality films with heart and meaning. The last good ones were Inside Out and Coco, and for the record I haven't seen Soul yet, but Soul does look very promising. As for Marvel, oh yeah, I don't have much to say, I believe it speaks for itself. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created iconic, memorable characters, and because of them, comic books became a norm, and their adaptations, well, they were mixed at best. However, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy proved that superhero films can not only be taken seriously, but they can speak to a wide variety of people. But we still had a long way to go before superhero films were, not average or terrible. Then came the Marvel Cinematic Universe and created a set of heroes for our time that we can identify with. Despite having seen these movies only once, I remember being interested in them. They had characters that were identifiable with hurdles and issues to overcome. They knew about responsibility, what they were meant to do, how to work as a team, and also how each one of them connected with one another. Not to mention the Infinity Saga, as the first 3 phases were known, were primarily about introducing the characters in the right way, how each of the Infinity Stones related to the world and the characters, and this series proved that you can make a great superhero finale by making the characters vulnerable, making them human, and relatable. The reason why I haven't said much about them is because they have their own set of issues unrelated to Lucasfilm, Disney, or Pixar. And keep in mind, all of these issues appeared after Avengers Endgame. These include inconsequential writing styles, inconsistent timelines, God, what the hell are you doing? Wokeness, rushing out products like assembly lines, and being mostly uninteresting films after the Infinity Saga ended. Not to mention, some of the effects look at times, in the case of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, unfinished and creepy. All Marvel has to do is limit how many films and shows are being produced. If there has to be a female character, make them interesting and human instead of, well, whatever they're doing with Captain Marvel right now, and take their time establishing the whole multiverse concept. How is it that the Spider-Verse movies and Everything Everywhere All at Once explain the multiverse idea better than the MCU can?
They don't know you and I are in this universe yet, so hopefully I'll have some time to explain. I'm not your husband, and he's not the one you know. I'm another version of him from another life path, another universe.
And these nodes where the lines converge?
They are the canon. Chapters that are a part of every Spider story, every time. Canon events are the connections that bind our lives together.
Loki tried to explain it, but if you don't have Disney Plus, you are going to miss vital information that was established in not just Loki, but also WandaVision. Fortunately, Loki and WandaVision just got physical releases. If Marvel can follow these steps, I know the MCU can be good again. They do this and take their time establishing the story, characterization, logical consistencies, pacing, writing, and narrative structure, then Marvel can really shine again. Look at Spider-Man No Way Home, and look at how that movie had an airtight story, great character development, and the moment that connected with many people, which I won't reveal if those of you haven't seen it. It's possible, but only if they put in the effort. Disney's issue is a much more complicated one. Bob Iger was appointed president in 2005 after Michael Eisner left. Over the next 20 years, after their last Renaissance film, Fantasia 2000, Disney once again experimented to see whatever stuck. There were some hits in the lineup, like the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, particularly the first two films, 2002's The Wookiee, Miracle, about the Miracle on Ice event at the 1980 Winter Olympics, Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe, their Disney nature lineup of films like Earth and African Cats, and even hits in their animated division, like one of my favorite films, Princess and the Frog, Frozen, Moana, Zootopia, and Wreck-It Ralph. But most of these films were just average. Not hurting anyone, not trying to change the medium, just watchable films that some of them you might actually forget about. As for their direct-to-video sequels, blah. Remember too that their TV division had been on a roll for some time, with the Disney Afternoon and the Disney Channel, but their TV stuff at this time mostly comprised of Disney Channel shows in their partnership with ABC and ESPN. Which, by the way, why would Disney ever be involved in sports anyway? Their Disney Channel stuff was simply lighthearted, family-oriented sitcoms, like Lizzie McGuire, That's So Raven, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Wizards of Waverly Place, and others. However, despite all of this, there actually were some other shows in that lineup that I did watch as a kid. And yes, I do actually consider some of these shows nostalgic, like the Lilo and Stitch TV show, the classic crossover House and Mouse, which a concept like that had never been done before. Merging all these characters from Disney's history into one place was a big deal. Remember, this was before the recent short, Once Upon a Studio, Recess, Doug, and yes, I did remember watching Kim Possible a few times in my life. Nowadays, Disney Channel is pretty much dead. All their shows have low viewership status, and what made them stand out, like showing their classic movies and shows, as well as their Disney Channel stuff, is long gone. And let's not forget Radio Disney, which helped launch the careers of people like Hannah Montana and Selena Gomez. That one defunct a long time ago. Other TV blocks like Toon Disney, Disney XD, and of course Disney Junior also had shows of varying quality. Nowadays, no one really watches these shows either, except for Bluey. Okay Disney, here's a lesson for you. If you're creating a TV channel, the only thing you have to offer is a show that you imported from Australia, which by the way I should point out, you have censored that show more times than I care to count, and Bluey is a show that does not deserve to be censored whatsoever. If you're creating a TV channel and the only thing you have to offer is one show, there's a perfectly good reason why nobody's watching your stuff! And don't even get me started on the parks. The parks have their own history that I'm not going to get into. For now, they are doing okay. At least until recently. I'll get back to that. With Disney purchasing Marvel in 2010 and Lucasfilm in 2012, They turned out movies like assembly lines. They even went as far as to buy 20th Century Fox and National Geographic and all its assets. Yet this constant buying has led to some people saying that Disney is constantly buying properties like an empire.
Stop it. Get some help.
It wasn't until 2019 when Disney's reputation started to go downhill, and for good reasons. Their movies more forgettable. Disney Plus was getting controversies of censorship and certain movies omitted from the service. Bob Chapek becoming president, Disneyland and Disney World attendance went down, Disney's response to the pandemic was poor at best, their stock went down significantly, Iger was brought back, his decisions are continuing to get scorned, Disney losing $129 billion in the last year and this year alone, Disney pushing woke political agendas rather than producing good movies and shows. They're being sued by shareholders because they lied about Disney Plus statistics, and Disney's remake strategy is falling apart. The Little Mermaid remake alone was a flop by Disney standards, and rightfully so. No, it had nothing to do with making Ariel black. There were numerous other reasons as to why this went so horribly wrong. In fact, a better question is, why are these remakes being made at all? But I digress. In fact, the Little Mermaid remake was actually a bigger flop than even Disney realized. There was a recent report stating that the budget for this movie went way sky high, and not to mention the marketing, the merchandise, this was a catastrophic failure. Bob's response to all of this? Well, last year the SAG-AFTRA strike happened, in which many actors and directors went on strike, citing they are not being paid enough by these big companies, not to mention the threat of AI looming over them. In an interview with CNBC, Bob pointed out that the writers' expectations were, quote, unrealistic, and that it disturbed him. The problem is that he said this during an event held by rich business tycoons. What he was really saying was that despite their complaints, we just can't help pay for these writers and actors despite all the money we have.
Here's a dose of reality for you, Bob. Writers cannot afford to pay their mortgages. Actors are not able to make a living in Los Angeles anymore. That is reality to us, not flying around on private jets. And until you accept that reality, we are going to be out here on the picket lines, withholding our labor, depriving you of your product, and you will not make another dollar off of us until you come back to the table and face reality and negotiate with us as you have refused to do.
And Disney extended his contract to 2026.
But wait! There's more!
These previous controversies ranged from not having enough LGBTQ characters, and when they do have them, they are portrayed poorly, Disney's relationship with Pixar being rocky due to money and distribution issues, Disney's California Adventure being scrutinized for whatever reason, the handling of Blue Skies Studios' shutdown, the Animal Kingdom Park being criticized by animal rights activists, the amount of censorship of certain titles on physical media and on Disney+, the handling of Song of the South, the series Primo being called racist, selling ABC Family, now known as Freeform, to Disney behind ABC's back, Michael Eisner's relationship with former Disney president Frank Wells before he died in 1994, its treatment of its employees at the theme parks and on set of some of its properties, and censoring their own history. But nowadays, fair controversies range from lying about Disney Plus numbers, lying about theme park attendance numbers, to being sued by various people for various reasons, Disney unable to understand the change in how people consume content, making $300 million films and shows with little to no return, and forcing people to pay thousands of dollars for one room on their cruise lines. In fact, speaking of which, last year they opened a Star Wars themed hotel called the Galactic Star Cruiser. If you wanted to stay at this hotel, which was based on the sequel trilogy and not the other two trilogies, you would have had to pay $6,000 for a 2-day stay, which was so ludicrous that it shut down 18 months later for obvious reasons. As a result of this, the public is becoming more and more aware of what Disney is doing. Their fan base is being depleted month after month, their stock is dropping, Disney Plus subscribers are dropping like flies. Things are just getting worse and worse. Investors are obviously concerned more than likely they will cut them off. And don't even get me started on Disney's latest form of negligence, in which they simply refused to compensate a man who lost his life in one of the Disney parks after suffering a severe allergic reaction. The reason is he subscribed to a Disney Plus trial, and in the terms and conditions it says that he is unable to sue Disney for anything as a result. Now, apparently they are going to court over this, which is fine, but still. Disney has finally hit that iceberg. Let me present to you Rachel Zegler.
Weird.
In 2016, Disney quietly announced that they would make a live-action remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Most people's reactions were like,
So what else is new?
But then controversy arose when Latino actress Rachel Zegler, who was in the recent Hunger Games prequel, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, was cast as Snow White. So many people were against this, a Latino actress playing a white princess. A princess who was called Snow White for having a face as white as snow caused outcry. Things only got worse from there as Rachel was interviewed for the first time about it.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be. You know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story. With a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird.
It was clear that she did not like the original, nor did she like anything associated with it, and yet Disney casted her in the lead. Her reception started to dissipate. Her statements were incredibly contradicting to one another.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it for the first time in probably 16, 17 years.
Not only that, but someone leaked photos of the cast in costume. And yes, these are the dwarves. Oh wait, they're not dwarves. They are, as they're saying, magical creatures. Which is just another term for, we are not going to say dwarves because it's a bad word now, even though the word dwarf is not a bad word. Peter Dinklage actually agrees with this. He was very vocal about saying that Disney missed an opportunity to cast actual little people as the dwarves.
What am I doing?
And then Rachel said this, which didn't help her case at all.
I'm gonna stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess. I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
Not to mention, Disney execs are scrambling to try and make this film, a film that should never have been greenlit or thought of in the first place. And yet somehow they are trying to make it work. How can you save a disaster like this is beyond me. No one can save this train wreck of doom. And yes, I know they announced that they were going to delay the film a whole year so they can turn the actors into dwarves, but it's too late for that. The public already crucified this film. They know for a fact that this is going to not work. Why are they trying to save what they know will be a disaster? Why go through with it when they can save more money by scrapping it and spending that money on something more meaningful? And if all of that wasn't enough, in 2022, the set caught fire. That's great that no one was hurt, but there's a much bigger issue here. That fire should have been a clear message to Disney to cancel the film entirely. What more evidence do you need? And yes, it is obvious why there are bad test screenings. It's obvious why people on the inside are saying that, hey, this isn't working. And you know why? Because no one wanted to see this. No one wanted to see it, no one wanted it to be made, and this movie has been plagued by one bad thing after another. And the twist is, this is only going to get worse.
You're screwed. Yeah, you're totally screwed.
And let's get this out of the way right here and now. There is absolutely nothing wrong with what Disney is doing when it comes to diversity and inclusion. In fact, Disney hired black animators as far back as the 1950s. Yes, look it up. His name is Floyd Norman. He was hired as Disney's first African-American animator to help work on Sleeping Beauty, and he would go on to help animate other Disney films like The Jungle Book and Robin Hood, to name a few. And not once, according to him, was he ever a victim of prejudice. Disney is acting like they care about representation and diversity now, with Raya and the Last Dragon, Coco, and all that, when in actuality, they've been doing this for a very long time. Just look at Princess and the Frog and Mulan, for example, and what I mentioned a minute ago. And Disney is totally in the right here. Diversity and inclusion is a vital part of our society and should be a vital part of our society. We are living in a good time now. We are more accepting of other cultures, races, nationalities, sexual preference, whether somebody is transgender. We are more accepting of these and other aspects now, and they should be represented on film. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and what Disney has been doing as of late is the wrong way to do it. By only relying on the message to carry the story, you're essentially saying that the theme and the message is more vital than the story and the character arc you're trying to tell. Imagine for a second if classics like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner or the most recent film Cabrini, for example, imagine how different those films would be if all they focused on the theme that they were trying to get across and that the story was essentially in the background. The story and the characters are important, and the message comes out through the film. You start off with that, but as you go along, the message and the theme that you are trying to get across shines through the story and the character arc. If all you have is messaging, then whatever story you are trying to tell gets muted, diluted, and lost. Just look at what happened to Reimagine Tomorrow. A great concept on paper and one that I highly supported. However, the program was incredibly problematic from the start. Mostly what went on behind the scenes during and after the creation of it. What Disney doesn't understand is that diversity and inclusion is something that comes naturally through everyday people and in professions like the arts, the military, or at NASA, for example. Social changes and newly found attitudes push the need for acceptance and tolerance. Forcing it on us is not the way to go. Here's a tip. Don't create a program dedicated to diversity and inclusion and then say you had an agenda behind it. Legally speaking, the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed to give employees equal opportunities to be hired regardless of their race, religion, sexual preference, gender, nationality, or social status. What Disney has been doing is the wrong way of doing it. I have read the documents that got leaked. The foundation for a good program is there, but the issue is the subtext. Organizations like the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission are great, but other programs like DEI need work. Issues such as the lack of equal opportunity, lack of meritocracy, one group of people not being hired over the other, and forcing it upon those who feel less accepted due to these practices need to be addressed in order to create a safe space for anyone and everyone. Disney is one of these companies in dire need of a change, especially when they are pulling stunts like this.
Very careful around messaging because they don't want to get to open discrimination in either direction. But certainly there have been times where, there's no way we're hiring a white male.
Earlier this year, Disney was sued recently for violating federal laws regarding hiring practices. Well, several months later in June, Disney's senior vice president just revealed that they're discriminatory toward white people, people who are quote-unquote not black enough, and using code words to avoid getting in trouble.
We had a situation where we wanted to hire somebody in the department a few years ago now, who was half black, but didn't appear half black. And there was a creative executive who was like, we're not, that's not what we're.
Which is ironic because I thought according to the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, aren't programs like this designed to prevent someone from not being hired due to race or if someone is multiracial?
This is hard to believe, isn't it?
Let me introduce to you, Sean Bailey. If you don't know who he is, Sean became president of the Walt Disney Motion Pictures division in 2010. He is the ringleader behind these live-action remakes. I know it was him because the first film under his leadership was the Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland film. He is the one who is credited as the man who is forcing these live-action remakes. He is the one greenlighting these terrible films. He is the one who oversees the production of these films. Yes, he also supported production of good films, but still, this guy has greenlit more bad films than good ones. The funny thing is that unlike the two Bobs who haven't said much about these films, Sean has been very vocal about it. He's proud of the so-called updating classics. In fact, the New York Times gave him a glowing review.
Oh, well, you failed miserably!
Here's the thing. Bob Iger knows he screwed up the company. Bob Chapek was clueless. Kathleen Kennedy's eyes were too stapled shut to notice the negative feedback, and Sean Barry could care less. These people are responsible for the failures of Disney Plus, the theme parks, the films, the TV shows, and channels. They've actually gotten worse because of their leadership, not because of anyone else, or us for that matter. These people have made excuse after excuse. As Disney's reputation, support, and stock are being drained further and further, people know exactly who to blame. Yes, I know articles are pointing out that Bob's exhausted and overwhelmed, but that's because some of that he did himself. And as of now, it has gotten so bad that Bob is considering selling either some of his assets or the entire company to Apple. Think about this. Apple and Disney. Two entertainment giants merging into one. Do you think that Apple is going to fix most of Disney's problems? Maybe, but I would prefer it if Disney fixed their own problems instead of relying on another company to do the dirty work for them. It is so bizarre how Disney investors have been scratching their heads, asking themselves where did they go wrong. They blamed everything. They blamed the pandemic, the writer's strike, Disney Plus, the attendance numbers in the parks, the fact that customers would rather see a Disney movie on Disney Plus instead of in theaters. They blamed everything. The only thing they haven't blamed is themselves. The truth is, folks, is that they have simply given up. They don't care about making good quality projects anymore. They say that they care. They say that they want to make good, long-lasting projects, but they don't. It's all just advertising. It's all just advertising for another stupid film they're doing. They don't care about us. They don't care about what we really want. Instead, they're pickpocketing on who to blame next because they cannot understand what the real problem is. It is so simple. It is not rocket science. All you have to do is just look at the results and understand what the real problem is. They're dodging the real problem with the company. And do you want to know why that is? Do you want to know why they're dodging the real problem with the company? Do you want to know why they're making minimalistic trash? It's because Bob and everybody who is running the company right now is in total bloody denial. And we are to be blamed for these movies' underperformance? No. We are not going to accept mediocrity. We are not going to accept these fart nuggets that get slapped on the theater screens every year. And referring to you, Walt Disney Company, you say that there's too much messaging in your movies. You say that good storytelling is going to come again. But are you really going to change? Are you really going to do something about it? No! You are not doing a single solitary thing to change it. It's like feeding the cockroaches when you want to get rid of them. Why would you do that in the first place? By the way, for the record, doubling down on the same strategy over and over again and expecting a different result is not solving the problem. It's not a way to win your audience back. They have already left because you're completely clueless. You're doing this because you're hoping that one of these projects will land, and guess what? They haven't. And it's not working. And we're not being biased or anything. All these reviews that we've been doing, we're trying to help you. We are trying to help you understand what the problem is. And yet you have shut us out every single time, believing that soulless live-action remakes and mediocre live-action movies and bland, average, ordinary animated films are the way to go. That's how you draw people in. That is not working anymore. It is done. It is over. We're trying to tell you to stop and you're not listening. You and your inner circle are ruining what the company originally stood for. Your team is ruining what Walt originally stood for when he created the studio 100 years ago. And you're telling me that this is acceptable. You are telling us that this is okay, that we need to just deal with it. No, we are not going to just deal with it. We expect better. Not perfect, but at least slightly better. You did that back in the 80s. Your company was on the verge of collapse that time as well. And what did you do? You hired the right people. You hired a good team to bring the company afloat again. You did that on your own accord. You knew something was wrong and you did something about it. Where is that support now? You're shutting them out. You're canceling good projects and greenlighting garbage ones. You are doing this to yourself. We're not to blame. We're trying to warn you. We're trying to help you understand what the problem is. You and your team are causing your company to implode in on itself, poltergeist style. And don't even get me started on LucasFilm. You disgraced Indiana Jones with that Dire Destiny crap. You are sucking all the life out of Star Wars. Marvel is literally drying up. Not to mention they have no sense of direction anymore. And Pixar, look, I've made fun of you before. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you were overrated. But now you're just like so below overrated. So even below underrated. So please, all you studios, do something! Disney is no longer the company they once were. The trust in their brand is empty and hollow. After 100 years, the magic that put the company on the map has finally run out. But that might not be a bad thing. The reason I'm saying all of this is that it has nothing to do with my disdain for what the company represents now. If anything, far from it. By saying no to these films, we are actively and slowly waking up to remove ourselves from the strand of mediocrity. We are slowly no longer brainwashed by a massive company or blindsided by our nostalgia of the name. We deserve better than what we have been getting from all four of these companies. We deserve better. We deserve films that matter. Unfortunately, we've been treated to mediocrity and horrible writing choices for so long that it's very hard for us to just admit that these films just aren't good. These films and shows come across as if Disney, Pixar, Marvel, and LucasFilm don't care about what they put out anymore. I know Pixar is still trying to be relevant. I know LucasFilm is crying for help. I know Marvel don't want to put out bad material. I know that these studios don't want to be prophetic. But the execution of these films and shows have proved that the ingredients that made film history and unforgettable memories are now just not the same anymore. As for Disney, at this point, They put themselves in misplaced, pushing agendas over good art. With Wish now released, the only thing I am thinking about right now is whether or not they care anymore. Yes, a lot of people have said that Once Upon a Studio is fantastic, but I feel like at this point, Once Upon a Studio is now their swan song. Some people are saying that Disney is making these choices on purpose, as if they are doing this just to be financial vampires. If that's the case, then Wish could be their last film, and when that happens, that will be a huge loss for the entertainment industry and a win for the underdogs like DreamWorks and Illumination that have tried so hard to have their voice be heard. Disney is slowly crumbling to the ground, and the only thing that will be left after this will probably be their parks. And even then, attendance numbers have dropped significantly. When they start charging people $6,000 for cruise and hotel stays, and when they spike up the attendance fees, people are not going to buy into that. In fact, they are going to lose out on business because they are charging so much. Rather than taking the time to make good material, they instead have to rely on cheap tactics in order to draw people in, without realizing that what made Disney, Marvel, Lucasfilm, and Pixar was not the wokeness, or agendas, or constant need to produce film after film. What made them a hit in the first place was knowing what was the right ways to tell a story and how to grab people. The parks were once called the most magical places on Earth, yet you wouldn't really know it. As I enjoyed myself at Disneyland, and as I stood where Walt stood, right in front of Sleeping Beauty's castle, I just felt sorry for what the company had become. I know for a fact that neither Walt or Michael Eisner would allow this kind of ignorance. But perhaps, maybe, it's better this way. Perhaps we would rather hold on to what really mattered about the company than to blindly support bad product after bad product. Maybe we like to remember Disney for what they originally stood for. Quality. Some told stories we all connected with. Others took risks, challenged us, or pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable in a Disney film. Some films and shows were hits. Others forgotten curiosity pieces. Disney meant something to so many people once upon a time. This is something that the company cannot recover from. Even if they have the financial resources now, what happens when they have no more support? Disney and all these companies are on life support, and the truth is that they are running out of steam. Some might say they are suffering from burnout, but what's really going on is they're suffering from becoming political, trying so hard to please that one group of people, and trying too hard to be modern and updated, and trying way too hard to please these activists that are constantly hammering down their throat that they have lost their way. Time and time again, whenever people have tried to update and modernize classics or films or shows or whatever, the results have been mediocre at best and horrendously insulting at worst. These four companies are drowning in their own ignorance. They dug themselves a hole they cannot get out of. But I did not say they are beyond hope. I just saw a documentary Disney put out recently about their audio animatronic work on Tiana's Bayou Adventure, and all I have to say is I'm impressed. They are not advertising some god-awful product or throwing one-sided agendas down your throat. They are actually talking about Disney's history and how they create the characters from Princess and the Frog for the ride. And man, these animatronics are fantastic. The amount of detail is sublime, and the level of care and attention to them is rewarding. And as someone who went to Disneyland and saw their audio animatronics in the Enchanted Tiki Room and the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, I can say that they still got it. You see, guys? This is how you win people over, not selling you something you don't want. You win people over by just simply having the right people talk about a project and showing how they did it. It's just a shame that Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy, or even Sean Bailey won't take up his example. They are still coming up with excuse after excuse, instead of actually taking responsibility and finding a way to correct it. And it's still getting hammered with bad news after bad news. This led me to one conclusion. They put more effort into the parks than they do their movies, shows, and business practices. However, there is one thing that Bob said that we can all agree with. Disney has lost its soul. Take a good look at that comment. Take a good look. It rings so true. It is 100% accurate. In other words, this is not what Walt would have wanted. Before I published this video, I watched their short Once Upon a Studio. And the reason I was able to watch it was because it was uploaded on their official YouTube channel. I wanted to see if there was even a glimmer of hope, or even a possibility, that Disney still had some magic left. And I'm referring to the Walt Disney Company and Walt Disney Animation Studios. I'm not referring to LucasFilm, Marvel, or Pixar. Just the main company itself. And after watching it, I can safely say, they tried. The magic is still there. It's just so faint. When was the last time that you and a group of people sang a Disney song? Take your pick, it could be any of them. Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo, I Just Can't Wait to Be King, Beauty and the Beast, Belle, Under the Sea, Someday My Prince Will Come, Hi Ho, When You Wish Upon a Star. Take your pick. It could be any one of those. When was the last time you and a group of people got together and sang Disney songs? I remember. It was 8.5 years ago. I was part of a group of young adults with autism, Down syndrome, or cerebral palsy. And I remember us gathering around the piano and singing the Disney songs because that's what we were all drawn to. We sang them as a group, and we sang them with feeling and emotion because we really cared about Disney and what it originally stood for. We sang songs from Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, Little Mermaid, Cinderella, Jungle Book, all that. And that was actually the last time we did it. Some of Disney's movies are actually some of my favorite films of all time. I do believe that after seeing Once Upon a Studio that the magic isn't totally gone completely. So what went wrong with the company, not just that company, but also Marvel, Pixar, and Lucasfilm? Simple. Bad management. Management team who doesn't exactly understand why these companies are falling apart. They don't understand what they're doing. And quite frankly, it's upsetting. It is upsetting that we are at this point now where Disney, Marvel, Lucasfilm, Pixar are all falling apart. The only way that good change will come is if we say no. The only way that we are going to get good quality again is when we say no. The more we say no, the more likely these studios will finally wake up and realize, hey, we need to change. The Walt Disney Company has been around for 100 years. Marvel has been around for at least 80. Pixar has been around since the early 80s. And Lucasfilm has been around since 1973. I know that each one of these studios can improve again. But the only way that that'll happen is if they collapse. Good change cannot come when we're all hypnotized by a remake of a film that we all loved so much and then we eventually realize that we got duped. I think we're finally being aware of that. I believe so. I believe that we are finally waking up. As I walked around Disneyland and went on some of the original rides, I just kept thinking to myself, there's magic here. It's just very hard to find. The Matterhorn, Big Thunder Mountain, the Enchanted Tiki Room, It's a Small World. It's there. I have seen it. It's only to be found in their parks. When the Walt Disney Company shuts its doors, someone will take a look at it and rebuild it. And remake it good quality again. But the only way that that'll happen is if we say no. We cannot feed what's biting us in the foot. Why would we want to do that? To those Disney fans, to those Disney hardcore fans who will defend Disney no matter what, I want to ask you something. When are you ever going to see these live-action remakes again? When are you ever going to see these films that have been coming out over the last 5 years again? How many of them do you remember? And was there any, and did any of them score above a 5? If that's the case, then maybe you need to take a look at them again and understand that they're not as magical, they're not as good as you may think. Let this be a lesson to you all. Let this serve as a cautionary tale of what happens when you run a film studio focusing so much on media focused toward that one demographic or that one group of people. So much so that you lose sight on what the studio, name, and the man who created it originally stood for. Whatever creative heart and soul was put into the studio in the first place becomes muted, diluted, abandoned, and dead. This is what happens when you hire the wrong people. That's the lesson here today.